So when it comes to playing on Android and some emulation, we can do some really cool stuff here and there. We have reviewed the Nvidia Shield a couple of times, checking it out with a lot of updates. I must say that it's still one of my favorite Android boxes. However, in the hunt of the AliExpress products, and I'm not talking about those basic plug and play Android box, I just wanted to find something of uniqueness, like something that is really cool, and I think I found a couple of items throughout the years that were pretty wicked. Yoo-hoo! It's the time for Package from China! So at this point I've been deep diving into the rabbit hole, and I actually found a couple of interesting Android boxes that are, well, let's say indirect, like in competition for the Nvidia Shield, because at this point so far there are not a lot of many boxes out there with the Tegra chip. But I did notice a couple of them had, like, for example, the Snapdragon, and had some overall interesting performance. And yeah, there was a lot of things they actually mess up when it comes to the software part. I'm just going to be honest with that up front. However, I think it's still very fun to revisit these devices and to showcase what is actually going on. Because some of them were having some really interesting specs, but also performance. And maybe if I can manage to get something going on with emulators installed and putting a front end on, maybe you can just make yourself a pretty cool Android gaming box. So that's what we're going to be doing. Quick overview of a couple of them, or at least quick. It's going to be a long one because there's a lot to actually talk about. So get yourself some popcorn and let's have some fun. And unfortunate where this thing has a lot of power on the inside and also was called the Nvidia Shield Killer, it came with a lot of problems. But still, how is it today? And is it still worth picking up? Yeah, so when it comes to the overall price point, this thing was completely overpriced. So what made the Phoenix one so unique? It's not because of the firmware that was on this, because that was more of an, like, say, problematic situation. So inside we're having a Snapdragon. So Snapdragon is absolutely an amazing chip. But the thing is, with the Snapdragon in phones, all kinds of different, let's say, applications, we didn't see it a lot when it comes to Android boxes. And this was one of those cool things that you had in this device. With the first generation of the Nvidia Shield, the Phoenix one also comes with a controller. It looks very familiar. It looks almost the same like an Xbox One controller. And I can tell you that the overall, let's say, triggers and everything feels quite nice. The analog sticks, but also when it comes to the D-pad. And I'm quite surprised how overall good it feels. But this Phoenix controller is especially made for the Phoenix one. The console itself, or the Android box. We have a micro USB that we're needing for charging it and connecting it. But actually when you're going to be plugging this thing in for the first time, it will automatically configure, so far I understand. And you can also navigate through the menu because we have this special button that we can change it out to a controller, but also as a normal mouse or navigation controller. So quite a lot of options when it comes to that. I've been also messing around with different controller configurations like the BitTop, but also when it comes to the Xbox 360. And I can tell you that, yeah, the compatibility with a lot of the controllers is problematic. So I was really forced to use the Phoenix controller. It doesn't work at all because this is clearly made for Asian market. So when it comes to gaming and all the future, it's a little bit of a messy stuff, especially when you're looking at the menu and all the stuff you see. Most of the things doesn't even boot up when you're having internet. Then we're having, like, the option to install yourself some APK files. Also here I noticed some issues, like some of the game emulators doesn't even boot up. But I got a lot of them working, so we could do some testing here on the channel. Alright, so let's check the specifications with AIDA64. So first of all, the model is Phoenix One. What I do like about it, we're going to get 4 GB of RAM in this device. And we're having a lot of internal storage total space. But it's a really old product, so that explains why we don't have 64 GB, something like that. The Qualcomm Snapdragon 660 is quite a beefy CPU. And that makes this thing just really cool when it comes to gaming. And for the GPU, we're going to get ourselves an Adreno 512. So in overall, this device, in my opinion, has quite some beefy specifications. Let's check the Android. And we're going to get Android 8.1.0 called Oreo. Alright guys, next up PlayStation 1. But what I did change today is that we're going to have a higher internal resolution. And the reason is just simple, with the normal resolution it runs just fine. Nowadays on Android boxes with lesser power we can run this. But I was thinking, what should we do when we're having like a beefcake of a system like this? Let's push it a little bit further. I can see that it doesn't hit the 60 FPS. That's a little bit of a bummer in my opinion. And that is something we need to take into consideration when you're having a system like this. So I wanted to try out two games. In this case, we're going to try out the first game. And you can see like when it's in game, we don't hit the 60 FPS. Of course, with a loading screen we hit it, but that is more cheating. But let's try another game. Let's try R-Type Delta and Shmup that is less demanding. Because you will see almost the same result. 56, 57 FPS, but when you're going to play, you will see that we're hitting the 60 FPS and having the full gameplay on this game. But when you're looking at the game as this, you can see that now it runs 60 FPS, 59, but I think it's just stable enough to enjoy this game. Having it 2 times the internal resolution, it looks amazing on this Phoenix One. And you can see like where a lot of these other Android devices struggle getting this PlayStation 1 lifted up to a high resolution. This Phoenix One has no problem whatsoever. So PlayStation 1 runs even with the 2 times resolution with some games. Okay, next up, Sega Dreamcast with the Redream emulator with a resolution of 640 by 480. And the reason I wanted to do it like this is just to see if we can run this game perfectly. And 60 FPS locked stable. Of course, take into consideration that even the Redream emulator has some games that are not compatible, but in the future they will highly possible fix this all. But like this game runs perfectly and we can play it on full speed on the Phoenix One without a hassle. Okay, so for the final test I wanted to test out PlayStation Portable with the PP emulator. And this device runs the PlayStation emulator quite well. So when it comes to Tekken, you can see this game runs on full 60 FPS. There is no frame skipping, no other tweaks. It's just set to the basic settings. And I must say that I was surprised to see that this piece of hardware can run one of my favorite games perfectly. So in the next test, we're going to try out Wipeout. For me, it's like the next level. If Tekken 6 runs fine, with Wipeout, we're going to need some more power. So it's going to be the best test. Running now on 60 FPS stable. But when you can get an explosion, you can see it dips down for a couple of seconds. In my opinion, it's not a big of a deal, but I just wanted to show you that Wipeout doesn't run on 60 FPS stable when you're going to push it. Especially when it comes to explosion and stuff going on. But overall, it got quite some good performance. Something you don't see on cheap boxes. So I came across this G66 GameCube looking device, Android based device, and I must say that I really liked it, the way how it looked. This thing has been sitting in my wish list for a long time and I managed to actually pick it up. I wasted or actually burned a lot of money to getting this, and actually knowing that this is going to be a really horrible or really great overall experience. And I mean, you never know what you're getting with these Chinese products, so that's the reason I love to check them out for you. Everything is implemented in here, and dongle, and of course all the necessary cabling like HDMI and the power supply. And particularly the power supply, you need to be careful, just need to keep them with the system. Otherwise it's highly possible you're going to be using some very weird connection of a barrel jack or just a different voltage, because we do have 5 volt and 12 volt of these Android boxes. So when powering on, I must say the lighter feature of this thing looks really epic. Again, it's a super unique design. I did see it before with a brand they released in Europe, but yeah, let me know in the comments if you know which version that was. Alright, so I want to just give you a quick look in the inside. Let's shut down the lights here in the studio. I can see that this looks kinda dope. But there is not really like a plexi that protects it, so you can basically stick your finger in it. A very unique design, and I'm very curious if you can tear it down and how will it look in the inside. Alright guys, so let's take a close look at the main menu. When booting up, after let's say 2 minutes or so, you're going to get this menu. It looks kind of stylish, but take consideration all the game pictures, it has nothing to do with the box, because in the end when you click on something, it goes into the online mode. So I'm guessing you're streaming everything. Kind of weird, didn't work for me. So if you're not living in China, it's highly possible this box doesn't even work for you. but there are some options. For example, you can add some shortcuts, and with shortcuts you can add like new emulators. So there is a way to install emulators. I'll give you a great example. When you're booting up like this app over here, nothing works. Okay, but here we're having like some applications you can sideload, or sometimes they're pre-installed. We're having options to play some retro emulation, and that is what we're going to do. But first, what I wanted to do is that we're going to check out what are we going to get with the specifications. So let's open up IDA64. Alright, so this is the specification list of it. The G66 Android works on a ROC chip. There's a double chip in a sentence. Then we're having Intel RAM 2 GB. And let's see, we're having a quad core that runs on 1608 MHz. It's not, let's say, the beefiest specs that we can see nowadays, because there are so many options out there. The GPU is a Mali T760. So that's what you're going to get with the GPU and CPU, and the Android is Android 5.1.1 Lollipop. Holy crap, that is really old. So that means when it comes to emulation, what can we do? So let's test some games out. Because first off, let's play some 16-bit power, and all of these boxes can run it most of the time just fine. Just wanted to show you, but in the end, when you want to play some high-end stuff, there it's going to get really interesting. But it depends, of course, how you want to play. If you can still install some RetroArch and install all of the cores with all the 8-bit and 16-bit games, you have a lot of options when it comes to the old stuff. I installed some separate emulators, and I was lucky that I found one that started to work, because I have a lot of issues installing applications in general, or they install and they're not booting up. So in my opinion, that is one of the first nightmares that I realized getting with the system. Okay, let's continue with some other systems like the N64. The N64 will be like a mixed bag depending on what kind of emulator you're using, and most important, what kind of game you're playing. So the first generation games will run just fine. I must say that depends what kind of emulator you're using, you will see like a significant boost in performance. I did mess around with it, but I couldn't get every single N64 emulator working on this piece of hardware. And again, that is just a big issue what I noticed with this Android with Chinese edition. So I was curious about PlayStation 1. So at first with this game I wanted to try it out on normal resolution and noticed that this machine itself is powerful enough to run PlayStation 1. Not really special, because now with the Super Console X and all the stuff that is getting launched, there are so many ways you can play it. But let's push it a little bit further with 2 times the resolution. And what you're going to get, that everything looks way smoother. And I also noticed that this box doesn't have any issues playing the system. It did dip sometimes one single frame, but that is in my opinion not really an issue. I was surprised to see that this device and this really old piece of hardware can run PlayStation 1 of 2 times the internal resolution with this game. So in the next test I wanted to push it to the maximum level with Sega Saturn. Somehow PlayStation Portable, Sega Dreamcast and N64, I must say I did a lot of messing around with it, but it couldn't get the Dream emulator to work. And with the PlayStation Portable, it was the PPSSPP emulator. It didn't boot up at all. But I could get the Sega Saturn to work, and it is a great, let's say, in benchmark. But don't get me wrong, it's like this is just a great direction to see what this machine is capable of. I was surprised to see what kind of results you're getting with the Sega Saturn, but it is not perfect and full 60 FPS experience. We just need more power to run Sega Saturn, PlayStation Portable and the high-end stuff. And even if you're looking at the PlayStation 2, but also the GameCube, you need to have like a very high powerful device. Let's say a mini PC, forget it running full speed. Just doing a quick look on this G60 model, and I would personally never use this as an Android box to have my personal information stored on, with a simple reason. Linus Tech Tech did a video about it, and sometimes you have these very strange older, let's say, Android editions, and it's possible there is some weird stuff going on there. So I'll be always very careful. They're giving me the chip-to-the-chip controller like always, the manual, let's see, toilet paper manual. And yeah, the reason I actually picked up this particular device is that these things were made for playing emulation or games itself. So I was really intrigued to see like, what is this? Like, is it any good or is it just going to be something really bad? And yeah, the first impression, I can tell you, it's not going to be like great, because this thing weighs almost nothing and it smells pretty chemical. Alright, so let's take a close look at the menu to begin with. So what I noticed, like, everything is not in English, and he did warn me before even buying it. That was really nice of him, but still I wanted to check it out what it is. And the main problem I'm having with this, there is no Play Store. Sometimes there is a Play Store, but the Android version they are running is so old that it's not really recommended using it. But overall, we can always try to sideload, so everything is here, like the file manager is here, so we can basically sideload APK files if you want to. But then overall, like, it's a really nice layout. Here we can add some quick shortcuts if you want to. But if you want to play a game from the box itself, internet connection is required. And the weird thing is, like, these weird motion games I have no controller for, they boot up, but all the other ones don't boot it up. And that is a bit of a problem. But let's play these games later, because this is quite awful. Alright, so IDA64 time. The system, it is a rock chip, model number G60. It's a really old rock chip. I think they are using newer models now in handhelds. But then overall, what we're going to get is an ARM Cortex A7 only in 1 GHz. Holy crap, that is really slow. Like, the typical machines are running around 1.5. And Mali 400 MP. Nowadays we're having around Mali 450 with the Super Console X, and here we're having the option. This is a rooted device, but Android version 4.4.4. So that is really old, prehistoric, old. So even if you're going to manage to install an 8-bit or 16-bit game, it will run just fine on this piece of hardware, simply because this is an old piece of hardware, but it is still capable of running these old two-dimensional games. But when you're looking at the device and you play some two-dimensional games, it will run just fine. But installing it is the biggest problem, I can tell you that. But installing pieces of software in this is just a freaking nightmare, because especially it's a really old Android version. And you will notice when you're trying to get some higher end stuff to run, it will not run great. The sound delay can be fixed, but I can say that the glitching is getting worse, and it also counts for the frame rate.
Round 1. Fight!
Because of the low spec, we cannot even run PlayStation 1 decently, so you can say that everything like Sega Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, GameCube, you name it, it's just out of the question. In my opinion, this box is pretty damn pointless, especially nowadays that we're having so many options when it comes to low-end stuff. Because Super Console X or another device that is not expensive can run PlayStation 1 just fine. Oh, I have no idea how to disassemble it, so the first thing that we're going to do is remove the two parkers. That's the obvious thing to do, of course, because I was just super curious what are we going to get in the inside. I think it's like a tiny PCB and nothing else. Let's see if we can remove some parts. I think we need something to pry it open. Yeah. And yep, I was right. 2 screws need to be removed and then we can pry it open. Alright, so let's see what we're going to get on this side. You're having this tiny PCB. And the reason why, because this is needed for the LED and the unit that we're going to need for the remote. Oh, by the way, I completely forget to talk about the remote, because the remote is really old school. You need to put in front of it because it's not working at all. So here we're having the PCB itself. What an interesting, really interesting piece of hardware. And the reason I'm saying it like that, so first of all, this is the Rockchip RK3128. Fun fact, like this, you see this often in handhelds nowadays. But you can see this construction, it's just completely waste of space, because this makes no sense. Let's put it this way. So in overall, like, the construction is something you don't see very often. Most of the time now we're going to get these very tiny flat boxes. There is a way to disassemble this, and that is what we're going to try today. Also comes with a metal plate. I think they want to just give it some extra weight so that it's going to stay like this. Holy crap. I was first thinking, hey, maybe this is for the cooling element, but nope. It's just a piece of metal that they put at the bottom. Otherwise it would even stand. Yeah, it would stand, but it's just so freaking cheap plastic. But when it comes to the Nvidia Shield Pro, nothing can actually beat this little tiny beast. Of course, this is the older model. They also like a revision with smaller storage and no controller, but still it's better than the Phoenix one. That particular one did came really close when it comes to overall performance with the Snapdragon chip. The first one I actually filmed in this video. So beside that, there's a lot of cool things going on, but these Android boxes, I think so far they have reached the end game. And if you want to find something to tinker with, I think the Nvidia Shield can be a very viable option. Thank you all for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think, and it will be great to see you in the next video.